Let's see.
You don't like it, right?
Yeah. I asked him like a month ago.
Nobody uses them. In fact, not since 1972, or that meeting we went to this
Karen.
morning.
It's at 9:30. It's supposed to be
The Topeka City Council meeting will come to order. If you would please stand, if you are able, and give your attention to Deputy Mayor Hiller for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce Pastor Ray Rodriguez. He is the pastor of Harvest Family Fellowship, which is at 522 Polk in District 1. Harvest Family Fellowship is part of the Foursquare denomination. The church itself dates back to 1885 when it was built by the Swedish Bethel Mission Association. It is a Pentecostal church and all are welcome. Thank you, Pastor Rodriguez.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Will you all bow your heads as I pray? Heavenly Father, let me say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here tonight. To you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for substance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thanks as well for the freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you. Thank you for loving us even so, from your boundless and gracious nature. In the scriptures you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore I pray for our Mayor Larry Walgass and all of our city council members representing the great people of this great city of Topeka, Kansas, for the various levels of city officials and our law enforcement and fire department. Lord, we pray for all in the authority over our city and ask that you would lead and guide the decisions they are to make in this time of crisis. We ask that those in leadership positions would be given the wisdom and ability to address all that is looming on the home front at this present time. Give them grace to govern according to your will, and may they not be motivated by self-interest, greed, or party politics, but rather may they be led to guide our city onto the path of peace and safety that only comes from you. I'm asking that you will graciously grant them confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, personal peace in their lives and joy in their tasks. I pray that each member of the City Council not lose sight of the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what will please you and what will benefit those who live and work in around our beloved city of Topeka. I pray this in the name of our name, Lord Jesus and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor Rodriguez. There are neither proclamations nor presentations this evening, so we will proceed with the roll call.
Mayor Wolgass?
Here.
Ms. Hiller?
Here.
Ms. Clear?
Here.
Ms. Ortiz?
I'm here even though my light says I'm not here.
Mr. Shem?
Here.
Ms. De La Isla?
Here.
Mr. Jensen?
Present.
Ms. Schwartz? Here. Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mr. Harmon?
Council members, there are no additions or deletions to the agenda. There will be one short executive session. Consent agenda, if the clerk will read.
A is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Joyce Grigsby to the Topeka Human Relations Commission to fill an unexpired term ending January 1st, 2018. B is approval of a workers' compensation settlement for Julie Hoffman, retired police sergeant, in the amount of $45,000 for the permanent partial impairment of her bilateral upper extremities for injuries she alleged from her repetitive movement activities as a police officer. C is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller granting the Celtic Fox an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at Seek concerning noise prohibitions. D is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the 2016 St. Patrick's Day Street Party. E is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller approving a special event known as the 2016 Niter Day Irish Fest. F is minutes of the regular meeting of February 9, 2016, and there are no applications this evening.
Okay, that is the consent agenda. Councilman Harmon.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
It's been moved to approve. Councilman Jensen seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the consent agenda is approved as read. Go to the action items. First is I'm sorry. Thank you for pointing out that I failed. We have the appointee here tonight, Joyce Grigsby. Would you please stand? And Joyce has been a long-term member of the Human Relations Commissions. Thank you for your service, Joyce.
Thank you, and I've enjoyed working with the city and the community.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Continue on.
Good. Good for you. We'll then proceed with the action items. First, A. Clerk would read.
A is denial of a security guard license appeal submitted by Jacob Keeler.
City Manager.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to ask Luther Gagne, legal advisor to the police department, to step forward and provide information on this item and answer any questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. City Manager, if I may, just to give you some information about what this is and how it got here. Under the city code, individuals desiring to work as a security guard, merchant police, are required to be licensed by the city. There's an application that they have to fill out that is handled through the police department. There are a number of factors listed in our city code to guide the police department in its decision on whether to grant or deny that license. This particular case, the individual submitted an application, I think it was on December 21st of 2015. It was reviewed by the police department. That review includes a background check, criminal records check. It was discovered that he had recently been on a diversion through the district attorney's office and Shawnee County District Court for 2 counts of aggravated assault. That is one of the factors listed in our ordinances if somebody has been convicted within the last 20 years of a felony. A couple of things with that definition of conviction. Conviction includes, by our ordinance, offenses that have been expunged from a person's record, people that have been formally convicted in court, people that have accepted a diversion. All of those are considered a conviction under our ordinance. And the timeline is 20 years from the date of the offense. Looking at this individual's case, his diversion had ended about 2 days before his application for 2 counts of aggravated assault, which is a felony under Kansas law, and that was the basis for the denial of the license by the chief of police. From there, he has the right to appeal to this body, asking for a review of that. That's a summary of how we got here, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
And the city attorney, could you give us again what our role is here? It's different than, in a sense, than just a certain passage of the ordinance.
That's right. It's set out in the code in 5.90.130C. It basically states that it's limited to determining whether the facts supporting the disapproval or the denial of the license are correct.
Okay.
That's it.
So we're really approving or disapproving based on what the facts are of that. Are there questions on from the prosecution? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, me and Luther went over this 2 weeks ago, right, Luther? We went down this path. Is Jacob Keeler here?
Yes. And
Okay.
he will speak later.
Okay, Mayor. Just give me a few minutes. I just wanted to make sure he was here because I want him to hear what I'm going to present.
Right.
That's all I'm doing. If you'll allow me some time. Thank you. I did read your letter, Mr. Keeler, and a couple things like I asked Luther in it that kind of really stuck out to me was you're hoping to have this appeal granted so you can begin working. And then you said, I'm asking you to overturn my denial due to its invalidity and hoping to gain this career. But there was something else that struck out. I'm looking for it really quick. I had my day in court and was granted deferred judgment after my 12-month diversion. Okay? So after talking to the city attorney, and what he's saying is, under the guidelines, correct, Luther?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that 50, is it 5.90? Is that it? 5.90, 140A? That you have to be cleared for 20 years. And, you know, I too, when I look at diversion, I look at being forgiven, but I know that there is that timeline. And so under this section, and correct me if I'm wrong, Luther, then you're telling me it has to be 20 years, and you're saying that his 20 years would have elapsed, but then he got in trouble before that guideline. Am I correct?
No, it's 20 years from the date of the offense.
Okay, but
So it would be going forward from the day he finished or the day he was, the crime was committed. 20 years into the future.
right, but didn't you say that that hadn't expired yet, right? When we
Right.
talked.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's still under that 20 years, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we can't grant it because it hasn't been over 20 years.
Well, the difficulty is if you say we can't grant it, it's discretionary. The chief of police has the discretion to approve or deny the license. And the things that are listed in our ordinance are factors to consider. One of those is a felony occurring within 20 years.
Within 20 years, right,
Right.
right. So I wanted you to understand that. I did read your letter. I understand where you're coming from, but I'm probably going to have to support this only because of the time frame. That's what really caught my attention. And I am a person of second chance, and I will tell this council one thing. I was shopping this Christmas, and this lady was tearing through the crowd, and she came up to me with tears in her eyes, and she said, because I take these very seriously, I really do. And she had tears in her eyes, and she said, you called my husband up, you told him you believed in him, we gave him a second chance, he now has his master's degree. So I do believe that, you know, we all mess up a time or two, but on this particular one, I don't think I could support that. Thank you, Luther. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there other questions for Luther on this background? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Keeler, you have the opportunity to come up to the podium and to address the council.
First off, I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to appeal. Councilwoman Ortiz, I really appreciate what you said. On May 9, 2013, I was arrested, and it was due to some people I was hanging out with. It was completely and entirely my fault. However, I did not commit the acts that I was accused of. I dealt with it like a grown-up. Not a lot of people are able to do that. I took it step by step, and I realized that the only thing that was wrong was not that day. I had taken my life from when I grew up, and my grandfather taught me hard work, appreciation, dedication. After that day, I started to take a look, and I stepped back, and I come from a very strong military Marine household. I had family members who were on the Topeka City Police Department, and after I started to go over everything, when I was younger, they instilled in us to serve the people you live with. Everyone you live around is your family, and Securitas offers up a ton of advancement opportunity. I didn't think I would even pass the Securitas background check, but I did. And then I heard that I was denied for my guard license, and that kind of hit me, and I figured I'd go ahead and appeal. And in my letter to the Councilwoman Ortiz, I made sure to say that no one's perfect. I'm not perfect. People do wrong things, and this is just the opportunity that I'm trying to make for myself to go on to another better place. Since then, I've made a lot of progress. And I want to let you guys know that the denial or the approval of this today is not going to stop. I just want to make sure to come in today and let you guys know that I really hope it gets approved because I want to start working. In the time that I've been appealing, I have been putting in other job applications, and it's always the diversion that comes back. The diversion was expensive. If it were up to me, I would have, but my grandfather, I talked to him on the phone, and he told me, if you didn't do it, you need to fight it. And I did. I had a great attorney, Mr. Sebastian Rusco, and he was very close with me during this proceeding. I just want to make sure that everyone knows up here and behind me as well today that people do bad things. I was just with some people that did some bad things, and my grandpa told me to quit hanging out with idiots because, you're in the wrong time in the wrong place, but the people apply to that as well. So just wanted to come up here and thank you guys, and it was an honor to meet you, Mr. Walgast. It would really mean a lot. Securitas, as a company, has been very patient with me in waiting and waiting and waiting. So if they approve this today, I get to start working Friday. So, and it'd mean nothing more to me. My beautiful girlfriend, she has a baby on the way, so that's even more of a pressing issue. So just wanted to make sure to give my little 2 cents, I guess.
Okay.
2 cents is worth $10 in a year, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We appreciate hearing from you.
Thank you.
Councilman Clear? Yes, you may.
Yes.
That's a question.
What other work have you done?
A lot of it is hands-on. I worked in American Eagle. I do seasonal work every now and then. In the summer, I try and help neighbors out and stuff like that. It has been exceedingly hard to find a job after all this happened.
That I have someone very dear to my heart that had a felony. And I'm sorry, it just takes a long time to get over it.
It does.
It's a mistake that you're just going to learn from for
I
20
understand
years.
this. Oh, absolutely.
And I too won't be able to give you to go with this because it's not the law. Because the law says you have to wait 20 years. But what I think you can do in that 20 years is be ready for that 20 years to be up, because it will be.
Yep.
And you just take it day by day, job by job, and you'll get there. And you are very young.
Yes.
And you still have ways to go, and you have a lot to offer. Maybe this just isn't what you're supposed to do, but there's something out there for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Ortiz?
And just to what I heard Sandra say, there are companies that do hire felons. We have 3, and I'll be happy to, if you leave your name with the mayor or the clerk, to give you those, because I deal with, I help young people, and I know that there's 3 that will hire them immediately to get that experience.
Sounds amazing.
Job experience. So good luck to you, and I hope this is a lesson learned, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Walden.
Okay.
I just wanted to tell you that it's great for you to stand up here and show that you're accountable. It takes a lot of courage, and it shows that you're ready to turn this around. I know how difficult it can be to go ahead and want to change something, but there's a law for a reason. However, just like everybody else is doing, I wanted to encourage you. There's a great program called Job Corps. And it's for individuals that maybe have had a rough start, or somebody that maybe wants to have a career. They pay you while you're going to school, they educate you, they teach you a trade, and they place you right after. There's a lot of grant opportunities with Washburn Tech. It's a great place for you to go ahead and get a start. I just, like everybody else, I have to uphold the law that's already instated. However, that being said, I just wanted to commend you for your effort, and those are the traits that on the long run are going to pay off significant dividends.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Councilman Harmon?
Thank you, Your Honor. Appreciate the comments of my colleagues. I'd make a motion to deny the appeal.
Councilman Harmon has moved to deny the appeal. Councilwoman De La Isla seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just to make sure, yes is a
Denial.
vote for the denial.
Yes.
We have 9 yes. Councilmember Shum voting no. Or I'm sorry, abstaining.
9 having voted yes, the denial is approved. This continues. We go to item B on expenditures.
an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson allowing and approving city expenditures for the period of January 2nd, 2016 through January 29, 2016, and enumerating said expenditures therein.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Approval would authorize city expenditures in the amount of $22,594,839.26. We seek approval.
Okay, council, you've heard this. Councilman De Isla moves to approve. Councilman Jensen seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the expenditures are approved. Go to item C, ordinance on a neighborhood plan.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Jim Colson concerning neighborhood planning pertaining to an amendment to the text and map of the Topeka Comprehensive Plan for the North Topeka West Neighborhood Plan.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask Mr. Fyander to step to the podium. He has presented this item, and there's been good discussion on it, but he is available to provide an overview and answer any questions.
Mr. Fyander.
Good evening. Thank you, City Manager, Your Honor. Good evening, council members. Yes, last week we went over a little more detail on the neighborhood plan for North Topeka West. This is our last or second sort area that we're doing for last year to implement here in the next couple of years. So let me just real hit on some of the highlights and what approval will do of this plan tonight. Number one, it'll amend their comprehensive plan. This will become the official land use policy for the neighborhood. Number two, if approved, we'll be able to start investing through our sort priorities and other investments in the area. And those would include some short term, such as our target area in the 7 blocks around Paramore, over $1 million in infrastructure, streets, alleys, curbs, sidewalks. We have another $500,000 of housing to target into that area as well. A little longer term, not too long, but a few years out, we're also looking at some significant investment in terms of the sidewalks outside of that target area to implement the pedestrian plan that's coming forth. This is one of the priority areas. We also have some half-cent sales tax funds going into the area in a few years for the street repairs. And last but not least, their favorite project that they like to see is the reconstruction of Tyler Street from Lyman down to Paramore. So that'll be forthcoming. Part of it will be in the CIP that you'll see soon. So that's very exciting. And so that's pretty much the summary. One thing before I close, I forgot to do last week, which was really to recognize the partners, our planning partners in this process. Wonderful to work with. That includes our neighborhood relations staff, public works staff, Shawnee County Parks, the NIA, of course, Teresa and Paulette, and then that's all led by our project manager for this, which is Susan Hanslick, our neighborhood planner. So I just want to recognize them because I forgot last week, and with that in mind, I'll ask for a motion to approve when ready.
Are there questions for Mr. Fyander? Seeing none.
I would make a motion to approve the North Topeka West Neighborhood Plan.
Thank you. It's been so moved. Councilman Jensen seconds. We do have one person to speak on this, Teresa Miller.
Good evening, everyone. How are you this evening? I know I talked a little bit last week, but I want to come up here regardless, however you vote, that I want you to know we started without a plan. North Topeka West had no plan for a long time. And we decided that we needed to step up and have a plan for these people. So we started out inviting the neighborhood, getting their voice heard, getting their ideas. Susan Hanslick, Bill Feilander, and everyone helping us. I think we have a good beginning. Now, this is not everything. This is a beginning of what we would like to do over there. Because I know it will stretch out to 5 years. I live in this area, so I'm going to go on beyond, because I have other projects that I've taken on myself, not just because I'm a president of the NIA, but because this is my part of town. This is my livelihood. So in the future, you'll be hearing about 2 huge things I would like to put in over there, which I am starting to work with Chamber of Commerce. I just got my foot through the door. But I'm hoping that you pass this because this is a great opportunity for my area. It also will start give us a doorway to really tap into our history. Sometimes you can do it by yourself, but when you start with a project, it seems to open up doors for people. So with all the history we have over there, and I told you there's a little house over on Tyler, and I don't know if you guys have even looked about it. It's an Indian outpost, and I'll give you a hint. It's really close to the YMCA over there. So as you're driving down Tyler, I want you to look right around that area, see if you can find that house. You'll be surprised which one it is. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Teresa. We have a motion before us. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, the neighborhood plan is approved. Item D, resolution on planning.
D is a resolution introduced by City Manager Jim Colson in accordance with Section 1860010 of the Topeka Municipal Code approving a conditional use permit to allow for a parking surface lot in association with a principal use on property zoned R2, single-family dwelling district and located at the northeast corner of Southwest 2nd Street and Southwest McVicker Avenue in the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Kansas.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask Mr. Fyander to return to the podium and provide information on this item and answer any questions.
All right.
Thank you once again. Before you is a proposed conditional use permit for a surface parking lot at 2nd and McVicker on the east side of McVicker. The purpose behind this is to accommodate the Shawnee County Health Agency, which is in the midst of renovating a building for the health agency across McVicker. This parking lot will be for their employees. And so as we looked at the proposal and it came through the planning process, there was 2 real items that stuck out that we had to address. One was, is this a compatible use regarding the surrounding neighborhood? And number 2, safety in terms of putting a parking lot and crosswalks in that area. The first issue, as you can kind of see on the maps, this property is a bit of an island, and so we don't, it's sited on 3 sides by public right-of-way. On the 4th side is a creek. So it's really kind of a standalone piece, and we don't believe that it will be incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood or lead to other incompatible uses or non-residential uses on this side. The second issue is with regard to safety. The traffic engineer reviewed and made recommendations in terms of having a crosswalk here. 2 things needed to occur. One was putting in a flashing beacon on either side of the street. We have those in other places now across town, so this would be no different. And really, the other thing to make it safe, we needed to merge a potential bikeways crossing, which was a little bit further north. So we would have had eventually 2 crossings on McVicker. We instead have merged those into one. So this was an opportunity to do that. So we're now going to have a pedestrian and bikeways crossing at this location, of which we wouldn't have had otherwise. So the county will be responsible for all the improvements, including the beacons and the crosswalk. There will also be a front yard landscape appearance along McVicker to match the residential in the area. So compatibility should be addressed in that sense. We did hold public hearings, a neighborhood meeting. No opposition or issues came up that haven't been addressed as part of these conditions of the permit. So at this point, Planning Commission and staff are recommending approval, and we ask for a motion to approve the resolution before you.
Are there questions for Mr. Fyander? Councilman Ortiz?
Thank you, Bill. I know you heard a opposition from a lady that lives on McVicker. You know who I'm talking about. Anyway, because I've heard it every Tuesday night when I go in to have my dinner and lunch, I hear it. So a lot of people that I've heard from with opposition, they're thinking that these are the clients that have to park there. And they're like, how are these people going to get across this drag strip with walkers and canes and all of that? And so that's one of the things that I've heard. It is a speed trap, man. They fly down that street. It's nice. We've made it nice for them. And then they also were concerned with the drainage. They said something about how Walmart built their drainage, that it flows through more, what do I want to say, from west to east, and they didn't properly get it, so it's not going across the road. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's what was told to me. So number one, are there any patients that will be parking there? Because I know they're real concerned about that. What can we do with the speed of the traffic? I mean, everybody hits that Walmart grocery store on their way to work, on their way home, and they're flying up and down there. And then what about the safety down there for, now you just brought up a new one, and that was the bicycle ones. I hadn't heard that, so.
Okay, Councilwoman Ortiz, let me start with the safety aspect. Yeah, number one, that street is probably higher traveled now because there's not a lot of conflicts coming in and off of that street. You're going to have more of those with Walmart, with the surgical center that has gone in. Certainly with this, those buildings are being rehabbed on the west side of McVicker. So just the natural conflicts that will come with people entering McVicker and not will ultimately depress some of that speed. The beacons and the crosswalks there are intended, as they are in other places on busy streets. We have them on 21st and Topeka Boulevard, and we have these with a lot of moving cars, a lot of fast-moving cars, a heavy volume of traffic, and so that has been proven to be safe for the pedestrians crossing. There will not be any customers or patients, I should say, using this parking lot. Those are reserved for in front of the building. These are for employees, and so you would think that those would be first thing in the morning and then rush hour both
So not the 8 hours a day.
So it won't be a continual crossing over. I will say, though, you do have people right now that crossing that street that is unsafe. You have people coming out of that neighborhood, pedestrians, that do not have a protection of a light to stop the cars. And so there's a bit of a risk involved not having a crosswalk and a light there now, because with development across the street and Walmart, you do have a lot more people doing it without those safety measures. And then thirdly, the drainage, that has been addressed. At least for this side, I can't speak for Walmart necessarily, but any new development has to be able to retain and release at a rate into our stormwater system that has no net effect, basically, on flooding. So we do stormwater reports that are approved by our engineers to make sure that water is retained on site and not impacting a neighbor, and that's would be the case here. There's room to do that. So I think that was that. Hopefully I addressed, if there's anything else I can.
So we've looked at everything, and I guess you must have, I know you've heard it, but so we've looked at everything, and you feel good about everything.
I do, and I think it's not just me that feels good. I mean, I think this is something that we immediately approached our traffic engineer about because this is a safety issue, and we heard a lot about what about the speed of the traffic, and that's not going to be. And you know, given the 2 points of time during the day and the warning signals that we are going to put in, it will be monitored. And so, but we believe it's safe at this time until such time as we have other reason to believe that we need to do something different. But at this point, there's not a whole lot more you could do to make it safe.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other questions for Mr. Feinder? Councilman Cohen?
Thank you. In this map, there's a house there. Has that property been purchased and we're not throwing somebody out of their house to put a parking lot there, right?
Councilmember Cohen, no, that is a vacant, actually blighted house that's been vacant for a while. And yes, they would be taking that down.
Okay, other questions? Question?
Well, I will, I make one comment and then make the motion.
Okay, so you're through then, not for Mr. Feinder, correct?
I think so. We've had this conversation. The thing that makes me the most nervous still is only having the flashing light, because that is 5 lanes, and that's people going on and off the interstate, not just Walmart. And it is fast. I've been assured that we've had these conversations. I appreciate the hearings for the folks from the neighborhood that were concerned. That at this point, even so, that the traffic expected to be crossing McVicker, as well as the traffic on McVicker, doesn't warrant more than the strobe flashing light, but that they will watch it if it needs a full stoplight at some point. They'll be watching, and I'm comforted by that if the strobe is the most that we can have right now. Again, I really appreciate the hearing process. This is a big step to put a parking lot in a residential neighborhood, as well as to be crossing McVicker. With that, move for approval.
All right, move to approve. Councilman Cohen seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Those opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
And having voted yes, the resolution is approved. Item E, labor agreement.
E is approval of a 3-year labor agreement between the City of Topeka and the International Association of Firefighters, Local Union Number 83.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask Jackie Russell, the Director of Human Resources, to step forward and provide information on this. And I just also want to reference that there are members of the Executive Board and Clint Patty here this evening also, along with fire leadership, Chiefs Moody and Bailey.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Tonight, I bring to you a tentative agreement that we've reached with the Local 83 IAFF Firefighters Union for a 3-year contract. Some of the provisions of the contract include that it will transition training officers from 24-hour to 8-hour. It will remove automatic promotions for specialty positions. And it includes a salary increase of 1% for 2016, 1.25% for 2017, and 1.25% for 2018. Additionally, it includes a provision for a reopener in January of 2017 to discuss Article 27. And what we would be discussing is more flexibility for management when determining how and when to fill vacant positions. Also, there's a provision to reopen the entire agreement if the implementation of advanced life support services necessitates any changes to the current provisions of the contract. This agreement has been ratified by the union membership, and we recommend your approval this evening.
Okay, are there questions for Jackie on the agreement? Yeah. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Jackie, I just want to say thanks for a job well done trying to bring it together. It was tough. I do have a question for Clint Patty, if I may.
Well, wait, we're still on with this. Any other questions for Jackie? Okay, thank you very much. And then I'd like to give the opportunity for Randy Phillips of the firefighters and Clint Petty to come forward, and if you want to comment, and then stand for questions.
Oh, do you want him to go first? Or?
Either, your choice.
Well, if Mrs. Ortiz has a question for Clint.
Okay. Miss Ortiz likes Clint Patty better.
I want that noted and the video marked, and thank you.
No, I just, are you guys satisfied? As satisfied.
Councilwoman Ortiz, yes. It was a long negotiation, tough negotiation, but I think the best way to put it is an old saying an old lawyer told me, all's well that ends. And it's now ended, so we're ready for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anything, Mr. Phillips, that you'd like to add?
No, I would probably just echo those comments, and kind of along those lines, I was told a long time ago when I started on the executive board that in a true negotiation, neither side ends up with everything they want, and I would say that's pretty accurate for this negotiation process. I don't think we got everything we wanted, and I don't think the city got all the changes possibly that they might have wanted, but I think it's a fair and equitable deal.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for either of the gentlemen?
Can I make one more comment?
Of course.
I would be remiss, since this will be the last negotiation that I'll have with Chief Bailey, just to thank him especially, both for, not just for his conduct and how he approaches things in negotiations, but just overall. You will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. There's no other... Thank you. Very appropriate. Any other discussion? We have a motion.
We do? I'll make a
No,
motion.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Sylvia Ortiz moves to approve the labor agreement. Councilwoman Elisa seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor vote yes. Opposed vote no. I vote yes.
We have 10 yes.
Then, having voted yes, the labor agreement is approved. That completes the action items for this evening. We proceed to the non-action items. Clerk will read.
A is discussion regarding an update to the 2006 Fire and Rescue Services Facility Deployment Study.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. By way of introduction, this is a conversation that has been a long time coming in terms of doing the objective study, but I think it's absolutely vital to stress that this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one. The key here is that this initiates a conversation which is going to be based on the objective review of an outsider who represents a company that's been doing this for 40 years and has earned a very stellar reputation in this field. This is not a conversation that is leading towards an assumption of budget reductions, an assumption of reduction in staff. It is an effort to make sure that we take a look at the resources that are allocated for the provision of fire and rescue services, that we're achieving the most optimal response on behalf of the city. Today, we had an opportunity to meet both with the leadership of the fire department and senior members of the executive committee, and I thought it was a phenomenal conversation. And and you'll see the presentation that Mr. Green is going to make momentarily. But what I found to be most interesting was the level and quality of the conversation and the specific questions of some of the initial recommendations and the give and take as to what does this mean, how does it impact the organization. So I think it would be a mistake on anybody's part to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is what's happening. I think there is a lot of discussion that needs to occur, and I think that there's going to be a lot of better understanding and clarification of what the benefits to the community are going forward. So that being said, I would like to introduce Mr. Kent Green. He is the Senior Vice President of the Eastern Region of Emergency Services Consulting International. As I said, they're a company that has 40 years experience in emergency emergency management and consulting. I've enjoyed the opportunity to talk to Mr. Green over the phone. First day, had the chance to meet him, and he's based in Charlotte, North Carolina. The company is based in Portland, Oregon, and with that being said, I'd like to introduce Mr. Green to make the presentation.
Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Mr. Manager. Just to echo that sentiment, we appreciate the city of Topeka providing us the opportunity to work with the city once again. We did this initial study 10 years ago, and this serves as an update to the station location deployment analysis that we completed about a decade ago. Mr. Colson told me I only had 3 hours to get through the presentation. but I see the 4-minute timer, so I will try to do my best to squeeze it somewhere in between those two. The document itself is about 45 pages, filled with a lot of analysis. If you've not had a chance to read the document yet, I would encourage you to do so at bedtime so that it'll take care of any insomnia that you may have, because it is very data-driven. We met with the media this afternoon, and one of the questions that they posed was, this seems to be a lot of science and not much art. Well, that's exactly right. If this were a consolidation study where we were working with multiple agencies, then we would look more at culture and tradition and society issues within the organizations. But this is about deployment. It's about where resources need to be able to appropriately serve the demand of the community. So what we do in that is look basically at two aspects of the intent of this study. Originally, it was to locate future fire stations. As the department grows, as it evolves, as the community develops, where would additional fire stations need to be located in the future? About halfway through the project, we switched gears into more of an efficiency-driven study. How do we use our existing resources more efficiently without reducing the level of service currently enjoyed by the community? So for those of you not familiar with the fire department and how it's deployed, there are 12 stations scattered across the city, strategically deployed, serving 61.5 square miles and a 2014 population estimate of 127,000 and some change, slightly down from the 2010 census. So again, it's an estimate based on the Census Bureau's knowledge and how they do those things. But we wanted to begin by looking at the fire department's historical service demand. How has it changed over the last 5 or 6 years? We didn't want to go all the way back to the 2006 study. We wanted to just look at a snapshot over the last 5 years and what's changed. As you can see from the graph on this particular page, service demand has increased incrementally over the last few years. Some higher, some lower, but in general, it's been going upward. We also looked at calls by type. As you are probably familiar with, the fire department does more than just put out fires. They have become a multi-hazard, all-hazard organization. They respond to all types of incidents. Fires, as is the case nationally, are on the decline in the city of Topeka. That red block shows a very small percentage of the overall service demand that are actual fires where something is burning. The blue column represents medical service demand. As with any organization that participates in the delivery of emergency medical services, medical incidents comprise a vast majority of the incident demand. The green column represents everything else the fire department does. It's, rescues, fire alarms, service calls, public assists, those types of things that are in every other category the fire department has taken on, that when someone doesn't know who else to call, they call the fire department. We looked at service demand temporally as well. We looked at it by month. We looked at it by day of week. Didn't really find any trends there. But when we look at it by hour, there is a very definite trend visible. As again, any department that participates in emergency medical services where service demand is driven by human activity, service demand tends to increase between 6 and 7 in the morning, peaking during the midday hours and then tailing off into the evenings. If people weren't out and about and busy doing the things of normal life, driving, incident volume would be very low. But as with any society, especially in a city the size of Topeka, a capital city, service demand does have a very identifiable pattern in regards to by hour of day. More of interest to us was where service demand is occurring. This sort of looks like a weather radar map. The higher intensity colors represent higher levels of service demand density. So the areas right in the core of the city around stations 3 and 4 are the highest service demand portions of the city. The yellow areas, of course, indicate somewhat lower service demand, and then it sort of rings out from there to the periphery of the city. This was important to us because we wanted to make sure the stations were appropriately located to serve the existing demand. From here, we wanted to make sure that the resources that were currently deployed within the system could reach the historic service demand. Now, this is a travel model. So if you can imagine an engine or a fire ladder truck or a rescue, whatever the case may be, sitting in front of the fire station with the engine running, with the crew on board, and the dispatch goes out, they start driving. Everywhere you see green, they could reach within 4 minutes of travel. Now, understand that there are those circumstances such as traffic, weather, blockages, obstacles, trains, whatever the case may be, that would impede this to some level. But from a distribution perspective, the city is pretty well covered within that 4-minute travel model. As you can see on the map, there are some areas to the northwest as well as to the southeast, southern portion, that are outside of that 4-minute travel model. But as you saw previously in the service demand density map, the level of service demand is lower in those areas. To the northwest, there's potential for development. So we'll talk about that as we continue to move forward. The reason we do a 4-minute travel model is that's what's recommended in National Fire Protection Association NFPA 1710, the standard that applies to career fire departments. That is the standard. It is a peer standard, but it also allows the authority having jurisdiction, the local policymakers, to adopt whatever service demand level is appropriate for their community. We'll talk more about that shortly as well. Reliability, from our perspective, is how available resources are. That doesn't mean that they're not reliable. It just means that they're available. Unit hour utilization, or UHU, is an industry acronym that's used to gauge how busy units are within a system. It's more commonly used in ambulance transport systems as an economic measure so that they can increase the utilization and maximize revenue from the number of transports they're providing. We use it in the fire service loosely, just to identify how busy stations are. This particular chart, although it says TF1 through TF12, which stands for task force, it's really stations. They're synonymous. Within CAD, with the computer-aided dispatch models, or software that they provided us, it lists it as task force. So there are some of these stations that have a single resource. There are some of these stations that have 2 resources. So as you can see from this model, if you look at the right-hand column, the higher the number, the busier that station is. So Station 7, Task Force 7, is at 0.07. Now what that means is you take all of the available hours in a year, 8,760, and divide it by how much time they actually spent on calls from dispatch to clear. Now if you look at that slide, 3,589 hours is what they used of that 8,760. So basically 7% of the time they were actually tied up on incidents in that station. Clear as mud, right? That's why we also look at reliability from a concurrent incident perspective. This applies more to the fire departments. How often are multiple incidents occurring that would tax the resources of any particular station? So within Topeka, as is common in most fire departments, most incidents occur one at a time. In 2014, 52.1%. 2 incidents occurred 32.9% of the time. So now you have 2 units, 2 incidents responding to separate incidents, separate calls. 11.6% of the time, 3 incidents are occurring simultaneously. So the importance of this is to make sure that you have enough resources in the system to handle those simultaneous incidents. The next component we wanted to review was actual response performance. We know how much service demand is within the system. We know where the service demand is occurring. We know how often they are occurring simultaneously. Now we want to know how well the fire department is doing at responding to those incidents. We start with call processing. That is the time within the dispatch center between when the phone rings and they pick it up and when they dispatch resources to the incident. So a 911 caller calls, they receive the call, they dispatch the call, that is call processing time. NFPA recommends 60 seconds or less when measured at the 90th percentile. In 2014, your dispatch center was at 1 minute and 11 seconds. Exceptional. 1 minute and 11 seconds, even though it misses that NFPA benchmark time, we rarely see anything under 1.5 minutes. So your dispatchers are doing an excellent job at receiving the information, processing that data, and getting resources en route. The next component is turnout. That's the second element of the response time continuum. That means between dispatch and when the units are actually en route. Now, this data can be looked at in a number of different ways. If someone inside a station has a handheld radio and they check en route as they're walking to the truck, that's one way to get en route. If they're all in the truck and the truck is rolling, then they check en route, that's another method of measuring. Like any other fire department in the country, there is no standard policy on how that time is tracked. During the discussions we had today with the fire department leadership and the executive committee, we talked at length about how to correct that recording of that turnout time, because this is the time element that is the first element of time in complete control of the personnel. It could vary by time of day. In the middle of the night, you've got 4 people that have to get up, get to the truck, and get en route, versus if they're out in the middle of the day, out somewhere in the neighborhood, perhaps doing inspections or hydrants or something, that turnout time will be shorter. So it varies by time of day. National standard, NFPA 1710, is 60 seconds for medical calls and 80 seconds for fire calls. As you can see from the data here, in 2014, Topeka Fire was at 237. Again, there are factors that impact that time. Again, during this discussion today, if it is an alarm where multiple apparatus are responding or it's during a busy time, the radio traffic that is going on may delay the firefighter's ability to actually get on the radio and tell the dispatch center they're en route. So there could be some other delays that are causing this response time or this turnout time to be inflated over and above what it actually may be. So I don't want you to get too hung up on the fact that they're over what the national standard is. There are elements and factors that go into that that could cause that inflation. From an overall response perspective, from the time the incident is dispatched until the first unit arrives on scene, national standard time is 5 minutes for medical calls, 5 minutes and 20 seconds for fire calls, because of that 20-second difference in turnout time in the standard.
Mr. Mayor.
You're right.
It's not in there. His is different, and the city manager said he's trying to get us all where to be.
I don't know if anybody has a copy of your PowerPoint that we can make.
You might let everybody know. Everybody.
Yeah, I
apologize.
We follow them. Some are in here.
Yes.
The graphs are here. We're just,
What page number?
Page 20 right now.
yeah.
They're all in there. They're just
Sure.
grouped them.
My pleasure.
I will, sorry for interrupting.
Sure.
I will provide a copy of the PowerPoint so that you can make.
Okay.
Now, my printout may be slightly different than yours, but I'm on 19 in my book, maybe 20 in yours, depending on how it printed.
That's good.
That is historical total response performance.
Right.
If you'll notice there in 2014, the total response performance was 7 minutes and 8 seconds. National standard NFPA 1710 is 5 minutes for medical, 5 minutes and 20 seconds for fire calls. So that puts you about a minute 40 over what the national recommendation is. However, if we come back to the discussion about turnout time, where there may be some lag in that time, the overall difference between what the actual response time is and that national standard could shrink. One caveat to the national standard of 5 minutes or 5 minutes and 20 seconds, depending on the call type. 40 years of ESCI doing this type of work. With the clients that we've worked with, no department has ever met the national standard consistently. 7-minute response time is typical of what we would see in a department of this size, serving this population and this geography. So I don't want you to think because they're not hitting the national standard that their service is substandard. This is what we would expect to see from a department of this size. Using this information, we take the next step and begin looking forward. And then when it comes to populations, you have to look backwards before you can look forwards. So we looked at the city's population history and growth rate over the last 14 or 15 years. As you can see there, the blue column, gradual incline in population, growth rate, very varied across the years, slowing in most recent years. We take that information and provide a projection, which I believe in your report is on page 23. Is that correct, Mr. Colson?
Yes.
Okay. We looked at it 3 different ways. We did a mathematical projection, we did a linear projection, and then we applied the historical average growth rate of 1.5%. To produce an overall average growth rate, which indicates the population by the year 2040, based on this method, is likely to reach about 139,000. So again, not a dramatic increase in population, but if the demographics change, if the socioeconomics change, that can lead to differences in service demand. This information, we develop a per capita usage rate. We look back at history and say, okay, how many times did people call for fires? How many times did they call for medical incidents? How many times did they call for the other category? And we apply that rate to the future population projection. As you can see from this, I believe it is page 28. Is that correct? I skipped over some of the community risk. Okay. Again, fire calls are not expected to increase dramatically. The other types of calls, as the fire department, again, is an all-hazard agency, you will see increases because they just don't know who else to call. Always call the fire department. And then the medical calls, of course, will continue to rise. We expected as an industry with the Affordable Care Act to see a decline in emergency medical incidents. We've seen the opposite. We expected that decline because more people would have insurance, they would go to their family doctor. Well, more people have insurance, and now they have figured out that they can get seen quicker at the emergency room by calling an ambulance. So we've actually seen the incident rates rise in the emergency medical community, which brings up a whole different topic of alternative service delivery methods, which we will not get into tonight. So our job was to look at that information, identify any gaps and/or redundancies in the system, and provide strategies that would address those issues. Now, as we mentioned earlier, and I think this is page 31 in your document, our initial assessment was based on the NFPA standard 4-minute travel model, and it did not address the redundancies. If the city wanted a 4-minute travel model, 3 additional stations would be necessary throughout the city, and you see those there, 1 in the southeast, 1 in the southwest, and 1 in the northwest quadrant of the city. That's to attain that 4-minute travel model to 90% or better of the residents of the city. This particular model provides about 99% coverage to the city, above the 90th percentile measurement as indicated by NFPA. But there are redundancies in the system. There are stations that are redundant, and as you can see from this particular figure, which I believe, if you have to back up 2 pages, or 3, 2 pages, page 30, what this map indicates is where the redundancies are. Now, if you remember back to that service demand map where that high intensity area was right between stations 3 and 4, what the current deployment of resources indicates is that within 4 minutes of travel, you can get 4 engines within the vicinity of Station 3. Right below Station 3, you can get 5 engines. Rarely does that occurrence crop up. It does occasionally, and redundancy is not entirely bad. There needs to be a certain level of redundancy built into the system because of those concurrent or simultaneous incidents that we discussed previously. So if one engine is out, let's say that Station 3's engine is out, there's nothing else there to cover, a second incident occurs, an engine from another station has to come in and cover that. That built-in redundancy allows you to cover those simultaneous incidents. What we were concerned with was the amount of redundancy. We also looked at that from a ladder and rescue perspective. As you can see from this particular map, which I believe is on page 33, There are some areas within the city that do have some redundancy in regards to the rescues and ladder trucks or the aerial apparatus, not to the extent that the engines were redundant. One thing I need to point out at this particular point is this was not a resource or an apparatus study. In the original 2006 study, one of the recommendations was perhaps an additional aerial apparatus in the northwest area of the city. We did not repeat that analysis for this because we were more interested just in the station locations rather than the apparatus deployment. Now, if you compare these two maps, as we see here, the redundancy of the stations compared to the service demand, you'll see why we were concerned about that redundancy in the core of the city. Again, multiple simultaneous incidents can lead to resource drawdown. The more simultaneous incidents occur, the longer the responses are from stations outside of that particular area. So we wanted to find out what could be done to enhance the efficiency of the system. As you saw previously, the travel right now is at about 5 to 5.5 minutes. Current performance in comparison or contrast to the 4-minute travel model of NFPA. This particular map is on page 37. We wanted to do an experiment. If no stations existed, how would we deploy resources to effectively deliver the same level of service that the residents have today? Well, what that did was took it down to a 7-station model from a 12-station model. However, it did not cover the gaps in the northwest or the south, again, as you currently experience today based on facility deployment. So from a theoretical perspective, clean slate option, if you will, if no stations existed, these would be good locations to provide the same level of service as you have today. Understanding that that is purely theoretical, we moved on to page 38, which is what we called reduction option 1. This particular option eliminates several stations and relocates several stations. And one thing I need to point out on this particular map on 38 is it does not show Station 3. We are not recommending closing Station 3 because of the concurrent incidents and the number of times other stations are coming into Station 3's territory. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. It also does not show Station 4. Now, by deployment, by this model, the area in and around Station 4's primary response zone could be covered from other resources. The discussion we had with the fire personnel today was very informative. We as analysts use data to predict where travel models can reach into, how coverage can lay out. What we don't have is the institutional knowledge. What we were informed of today is that the area that Station 4 services has a very high fire load. It has a high rate of incidents for medical incidents. So there needs to be further discussion as this process moves forward about that particular location. And again, at this point, this is the foundational document from which further discussions must be had before any final decisions are made. What this document does recommend at this point is relocating Station 10 a little further to the south and relocating Station 7 a little further to the west and the north. Now, a note on that. When we do our analysis, we choose locations that fit best into our computer model. Again, that is theoretical. It's not real world. There may be a house on that property. There may be a shopping center on that property. There may be a vacant lot. It may be a retention pond. We don't know. So what we do is we build these models based on vicinities. And when we first placed our location at Southwest Gage Boulevard and Southwest 10th Avenue, We were then approached by the city manager and said, hey, we've got property at this other location on Southwest 6th Avenue between Fairlawn and Wanamaker. If we located that alternative station there, what would be the impact? Turns out it's about a 1% difference. It's a little further to the northwest, I believe. Is that correct? And there is some expected development around the northwestern area that's currently open. So that moving that station to the northwest would actually improve response to that area. So this is not a part and piece model. You can't have one without the other piece, or the model doesn't fit together. That's why this is a system deployment analysis. You can't just eliminate a station and expect the resources not to continue to be available for incidents. This is not a resource reduction either. It's a resource allocation. None of the engines that are in stations that we are recommending closing would be eliminated. They would be reallocated to another station to still be able to provide support to the system. One of the reasons that we did not recommend closing Station 3, and I believe this chart, figure 41, maybe? Page 41. This is what's called a catchment area analysis. Basically what we do is we look at each station's primary response zone, and we look at how many incidents occurred within each of those response zones, and then how often the home apparatus responded to those incidents versus how many times apparatus from another area had to respond into that zone. So for example, Station 1, top left. Station 1 responds to 76.64 of its incidents within its own area. Pretty good, pretty good. But then if you look down at Station 5, well, that's not working out. Station 5 didn't realize it was a touchscreen, I apologize. Station 5 only hits 34.6% of its incidents in its own area. What that tells us is either Station 5 is really busy and apparatus are having to come into Station 5's area, or Station 5 is running elsewhere and other units are having to come in and cover those incidents within that area. So what you can see there, if you look across the vertically, or I'm sorry, horizontally at Station 5, 30% of their calls are in Station 4's territory, which again tells us Station 4 is busy. So this is just another piece of analysis that allows us to determine which stations could or could not be relocated, which resources or which stations need additional resources, and how should we allocate those resources to ensure that the service delivery that the community is currently experiencing doesn't degrade. So as you can see from that map, there is a lot of service demand within Stations 3 and 4's area. That's why we're not recommending closure of Station 3. Our rationale on the closure of Station 4 was that resources would be available from a relocated Station 7, additional resource at Station 5, and an additional resource at Station 11. Based on the conversations we had with the fire department today, that's a decision that will have to have more discussion before any action is taken on Station 4 because of the fire load and the risk within that particular service area. So basically our recommendations are pretty simple. Turnout time, whether it's a human issue or a technology issue, needs to be addressed. They have already done some work technologically to improve the record keeping of the turnout time through the computer-aided dispatch system and the digital radio network. So I would encourage the fire department and the policymakers to monitor turnout time performance to ensure that it is getting to the levels that it should be for a city and a department of this size. Maintaining the current level of service, theoretically, you can close Stations 1, 4, 7, and 10. Already mentioned the caveat on Station 4 needs further discussion. 2 of those stations would be relocated to alternate addresses to better serve the southeast and southeast and northwest portions of the city. Additional resources would be moved from some of those stations that closed to Station 5 and Station 11, as we discussed. The ladder rescue coverage gap could be closed with a slightly longer response performance for those apparatus types, and that would not impact the effective response force assembly time that the fire department currently maintains. And just a couple of additional recommendations to think about moving forward. Number one is an alternative service delivery model for emergency medical care. It's something to discuss. There are lots of alternatives, from community paramedicine to quick response vehicles going out and providing first response care, especially if we're going to look at advanced life support protocols in the future. Something more efficient than running a $600,000 fire apparatus to a medical call. And then formally adopt a response performance measure. That's something that the city has not done, either in the fire department or at the council level. You have to have a goal before you know how to plan to attain it. And our models are built on a 5.5-minute travel with a 1.5-minute turnout time to give you a 7-minute 90th percentile response performance, which you're already at 7 minutes and 8 seconds. So minor tweaks to the recording of turnout time performance, and you will probably attain this goal without much difficulty. With that, I will open it up to further discussion or questions.
Well, thank you for your presentation, and it was well done in
a little less than 3 hours.
We're still all with you.
I still got 4 minutes on the clock.
You got 4 minutes to go. Okay. One question that I had first. We've talked about, are you familiar with the Mars manufacturing plant?
No,
which
sir.
Which is down here at the lower, on all of the maps. It's below all the time, and at one time there was talk of having, when they made the decision to locate in Topeka, there was discussion about fire coverage, and it's been a discussion point over the years of perhaps having another station further south in that area. I just wondered if that was into your deliberations, or because I don't know what the time is down there. It's below the 4-minute time frame.
Is it within the contiguous city limits?
No, there's.
Or is it down toward the air base?
It's by the air base.
Okay. Because of the disconnect between the contiguous city limits and the, for lack of a better term, satellite annexed areas, we did not take those into consideration at this point. We did, on page 24, look at land use as it pertains to risk within the community. And we tried to cover as much of the risk as possible with our models, but of course those outlying areas such as that would not be included in that analysis.
How do cities usually handle something like that then?
A lot of times it's based on locations of external agencies. Is there mutual or automatic aid for first alarm that can be utilized to reach into those areas? Topeka's not in a unique situation, but in a different situation that most of your surrounding departments are not fully career. So the dependability of those resources might be of question. Not to say that they can't provide excellent service, most do. But that would be something that could be explored with external adjacent agencies to see if resources are available to at least provide a first response, or even with the airbase personnel, if they would be available for off-site responses for structural incidents like that, at least for a first in unit.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilman Shum?
Thank you for the presentation. I was curious, what feedback did you get institutionally in regards to the recommendation to close Station 1? Geographically, that's a tough community to serve with the railroad and the rivers, and there's concerns that there wouldn't be enough coverage there. So just wanted to hear what feedback you got from the fire department on that recommendation.
I don't want to speak for the fire department. I'm sure they would be glad to provide some input, but our discussions primarily focused on Station 4 and the area right around that facility.
City Manager.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Ken, thank you very much. There is going to be a very strong desire in a lot of people to start talking about the preliminary recommendations and what does this mean for the station. I think that would be a very premature and not helpful conversation. As was indicated, we had about an hour and a half meeting today, which was very good, and When we talked about Station 4 and we talked about Station 7, we really didn't get into all of them, but for all of those cases, I think there needs to be a very extensive conversation. And the other thing that has to occur is we really haven't had a conversation yet pertaining to the transition from basic life support to advanced life support, the potential models that exist for community medicine. And I mean, I know that people are going to want to jump out and talk about this. It is way too early to have that conversation about any particular impacts. And we went through this not too long ago, and we spent a lot of time hearing from people. There is no decision. This is the first time that really all of us are seeing this study and talking to each other. I anticipate that we're probably going to have 5 to 10 more very thorough conversations amongst those who do this for a living and really start talking about what that means. I saw Kent's eyes light up a couple of times, like, okay, I didn't understand that. That's not something that I can do based on a GIS model without having any real knowledge. So not trying to duck it, there's nothing to duck at this particular point.
Okay. Councilwoman Claire?
Well, I disagree. I think we've got this so we can talk about it, and I didn't know there was any questions we couldn't ask.
I want to clarify, I'm certainly not saying that. I'm not saying that, and I apologize if that's what you heard. What I was saying is that we should talk about this and we should express our concerns, but I think it's very dangerous if it is presented as this is how we're proceeding, this is the initial start. So please accept my apology if that's what you heard. That's not what I was saying at all.
Okay, I have a number of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I read through this. Now, this is what I gleaned from it. Please correct me if I'm wrong. We do a good job.
Yes, ma'am.
We can lower our turnaround time and do a better job.
Yes, ma'am.
Then why the study? So tell me again, I kind of heard at the beginning, but I didn't write it down. You started out the study for one reason and switched to another reason.
We initially, the intent of the project was to provide a pathway or a roadmap, if you will, for future fire stations. That was really the crux of the 2006 study as well. We also, and that was based on NFPA standards of 4 minutes of travel. We understand that not necessarily just for Topeka, but nationwide, cities are struggling with budgeting and balancing those budgets. So we wanted to make sure that we provided all of the options and improve efficiency within the system without degrading service. So in our eyes, improving efficiency from a deployment analysis perspective is covering as much area, as much service demand, as many parcels as possible with the least amount of resources without putting undue workload on certain resources. So that's why you'll see this sort of spreading out of the resources, but still leave some of those resources in place with multiple companies in those areas that can respond to those simultaneous incidents, as well as the multiple company incidents such as structure fires.
So is this saving us financially? Or what's?
The financial savings would be, in my opinion, operationally only from a facility operations perspective. It would have a financial impact in the construction of 2 facilities. It would have a financial impact positively from the potential sale of those other 2 facilities, or the 4 facilities that would be, 2 of which would be relocated. So that's not something that we got into as far as the cost projections and the modeling of what that might cost. Personnel-wise, which is by and large the most prominent expense within the fire department's budget, would not change, because we're not saying reduce personnel or reduce resources. We're simply saying reallocate them to better serve all of those areas that are currently outside of the travel model.
Okay, because I'm just confused on, if we're doing a good job, it's not broken, why are we fixing it? That's my concern.
I think that is a valid question, and in the spirit of continuous quality improvement, there is always room to do things better. Will there be a cost? Probably. Will there be substantial savings? Probably not. But what level of service do your residents expect? What level of service do your residents, or are your residents able to pay for? And the better question is, what are they willing to pay for? You can have a fire station on every corner and provide everyone with a 60-second response. Or you can have a system built like yours is today, where there are some redundancies, some room for efficiency, but there is no outcry in the community about service delivery. As I said, and it showed in the response performance, your department's performing admirably. The response times are right in line with what we would expect of a department of this size, but there's always room for efficiencies to be gained.
Well, and then I know that I heard you say, it's for the future, a pathway to the future. And in my opinion, if we're going to do that, we need to start building some more schools and another jail, and let's, if we're really going to get on to the future. So I appreciate this. I appreciate your...
Schools are a bit outside of my expertise level.
Not mine. All right, thank you.
Councilman Harmon.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Green, thank you for your presentation. You are familiar with the deployment study that your company did in 2006?
2006, yes, sir.
With that in mind, what assumptions and benchmarks have changed, if any, during the past intervening 10 years in your analysis?
Some of the service demand has shifted more into the core, but then again, some has begun to reach outward as well. That was one of the differences that we noticed. You still have the same number of stations as you did in 2006. But during that study and when that was developed, we strictly stuck to the NFPA 1710 4-minute travel model. In this particular study, we did that as well, but also looked at current service delivery. As we pointed out, there is no problem with the level of service currently being delivered. So our assumption was, would the community support pouring several more $1 million into the fire department to construct new facilities, or would this be better to reallocate existing resources and potentially save the taxpayer money? Again, an assumption that we use to develop the travel models and the deployment models.
If I could ask a follow-up, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Kind of along that same line, again, looking over the past intervening 10 years, what empirical and quantitative data has changed during that period of time?
What we found is your call processing times are basically level, which is good. Again, they're doing an excellent job at doing that. The turnout time is increasingly getting longer. That could be a data issue. Again, as we talked today, changes have already been implemented, so the 2015 data may show an improvement there. Response times are also creeping up very slowly. I think there was a 6-second difference between 2010 and 2014. So incrementally, it is getting longer because your community is continuing to develop outward toward the periphery.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilman Jensen.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to come here and explain all this to us. I have two questions. I'll ask them both, and then you can answer them in any order you choose. So in looking at this, we have a number of bottlenecks that cross the Kansas River, and in disaster recovery planning, my concern is if any of those are compromised, that would obviously affect the response time to that quadrant of our community. Was that considered in this study? Is it something we should be worried about? And would that affect the recommendations of those stations? The second question I have, now I can't remember. Well, answer that and I'll come over with my other one. Sorry.
When we do deployment analysis like this, we look at the existing street network. We do not consider disasters as an impediment to that. We do look at natural barriers or obstacles and how they can impact, such as grade crossings for the railroad. We do take that into consideration. That should be a concern of the fire department's planning methods. If that route does become compromised, are there other resources outside of the city of Topeka that can be used, at least as a stopgap until internal resources can be rerouted and take a longer route to that location? It was not part of this analysis, but a very good point, and it should be on the minds of those making those decisions.
And then my second question was, so your recommendations for the future are based on an assumption that our population growth is going to be somewhat stagnant in the immediate future?
Relatively, yes.
At what level, say we become this fabulous community and thousands of people pour in here in the next few years, at what level would you recommend we need to crack open this again and reevaluate?
Any model based on population should be at least reviewed every 5 years to determine if the population targets have been met. Are they slower? Are they faster? Does something need to change within the model? That doesn't mean a whole new analysis. We'll be glad to do that for you. But it does not mean an entirely new analysis. Look at it, see if it's meeting the targets or if it's slower or faster, and then make adjustments based on where that development is occurring within the community. Work very closely with your land use planning and planning department to find out where these developments are going in, what types of developments are going in, because historically, certain population age groups tend to use services more frequently than other age groups. So if you have, hypothetically, a retirement community going in with 500 homes, expect a higher level of service demand for that than if it were a development based on expecting families, 30-somethings with small children that moved in. There are different factors that impact that.
Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too want to say that this is a very good study, and it's very informational, and I'm sure at some point I realized that you were doing the same thing as the resource allocation study that recommended closing 4 and adding 2 new ones to cover for the coverage. My concern lies in page 28, which has to do with service demand projections. And if you look at 2016, 748 fire calls, 14,142 EMS calls, and 3,694 other calls. What are those other calls?
Cat in a tree, child with his hand stuck in a vending machine, a false alarm, a service call, rescue, anything not with something burning or not with someone physically injured.
And if I may follow up, I saw some, I think it was in an email, that we do have a high number of calls, and those are probably the EMS and the cat in the tree calls. Is there anything that we can do to reduce that without having to send large apparatuses out?
Which types of incidents, the medical calls or
Both
the others?
EMS and the other calls.
Well, I think that's something that as you move forward and you do further strategic planning internally and looking at alternative delivery methods such as community paramedicine, going out with trained personnel and sort of preemptively visiting these folks that are repeat callers to reduce some of those calls, or perhaps smaller emergency vehicles that can respond more quickly with less cost. $40,000 or $50,000 SUV or squad truck versus a $600,000 fire truck that gets 4 miles to the gallon. So there are some savings that could be realized in doing that if the personnel were used appropriately.
Are there any, if I may follow up, are there any exemplary cities that we could look at that have done that to reduce the cost and to reduce the calls?
There are plenty of exemplary cities, just ask them. They will tell you. But Seattle is probably one of the, I know that's a very large metropolitan area, but they have been very successful in implementing a tiered response system. Salem, Oregon, a smaller organization that has done kind of the same thing. The problem with emergency medical services is there is no standard. It's done differently everywhere, whether it be fire-based, hospital-based, private-based, or third-party, municipal, county-based. North Carolina, where I'm from, everything is done at the county level. It's a county-wide system. Go across the border into Virginia, and it's all private. So it really varies. So they have different levels of expectations on the types of services and how those services are delivered.
And my final question, if I may, you had number 6, your recommendation was response performance. What accreditation, I know our fire department is not accredited, our police department is. Would accreditation be something that we should look into the future for many different reasons?
Whether or not your fire department is officially accredited remains in the hands of this body as well as the fire department. In our opinion, And in our experience, the benefit of accreditation is going through the process, because it requires the fire department to do a very, very extensive self-examination and compare itself against other organizations. Huge benefits from that, looking introspectively. And a number of departments go through that process and never seek accreditation. Not that they couldn't, but because they found so many things that they had to work on that they didn't realize were problematic, that they decided, let's fix these internally and then we'll talk about accreditation later on.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Green. How often should a study be done?
As we talk about every 5 years to review the information. That's not to do a complete study. That's, again, just to make sure that population projections and service demand projections are tracking according to what the projections indicate.
So, and then you did our 2006 study, correct?
Correct,
How come
yes.
you just didn't review that?
We did use that as a review, but we had differences in populations, and we wanted to make sure that the service demand was where we had originally said it was going to be.
Well, I thought you said we didn't have any growth. Is that correct?
No, you do have some growth. It's slow growth in population, but your service demand is growing at a different rate than your population is, which indicates to us that there's a change in demographics. And with the Affordable Care Act, there's a change in the way that people are accessing and utilizing your services.
So what you're saying is we have service growth, but no population growth.
Limited population, 1.5%, I believe, was the average over the last 10 years.
Not much. I remember in the 2006, if I may, Mr. Mayor, in the 2006 study, because I read through that study, very good study that I liked about it, and I applaud you for working with our fire department, because you said you don't have the institutional knowledge. Is that how you said it? But I appreciate you working with them hand in hand, because sometimes it takes them to make you understand
Absolutely.
What's really going on.
Absolutely.
Because I remember in the 2006 study when you said, let's close down Oakland's, that station needed to be closed down and move further to the east. But there hasn't been any growth out there, so we haven't done that.
Right.
So even though that was your recommendation, we've never done that because there's no development out there.
Right.
I know the one out south, you said we needed another station out there. So again, I'm seeing that in this study again. So I could agree with that. You also said that we needed a station in the 6th and Fairlawn, which I'm seeing that again in here, which we've been fighting for years, and there's a lot of growth out there. I cringe every time I think of a fire or I think of some type of instance that's gone out there, whether it's a medical call. We have security benefit in life that has 200 kids with a daycare. So I just kind of cringe at that thought, because I think we need to look at that in that area. That area has been, the service has increased. I appreciate your stance on saying that fire station number 3 needs to remain open, because when I got elected, that's one of the first things that I said I'm going to do when I get on there, and we were successful because they had closed it and we got it reopened for various reasons. But it's a busy station. You are correct.
Yes.
It's very busy. Another question is, you said that fire calls will not increase. How do we know that? How do you know that today, this year we had 5 and next year we might have 15?
It's very possible, and doing projections in service demand is a lot like looking into a crystal ball. The further out you look, the more unclear that crystal ball becomes. We use historical rates to try to predict what future rates will be based on population and per capita usage rates. So if over the last 5 years, 0.05 per capita had a fire incident, then we apply that 0.05 to future population projection, and it gives us an idea. It is not foolproof. It is not guaranteed. Like you said, their structures get older. The fire department has done an amazing job over the last 20 years, not just in Topeka, but nationally, at almost putting itself out of business when it comes to fire protection or fire suppression, because of all the fire prevention and life safety education and fire sprinklers and fire alarm education. They've done an amazing job at creating less fires. However, structures will continue to age. Newer structures burn faster when they do burn. Older structures will eventually either burn or fall down. So there are other factors that come into this, and again, this is a projection based on historical usage rates only.
Okay, because I do represent an older part of town where the wiring is bad, where the houses are closer. So when one catches, it usually spars off to the next one, and so that's...
And that was a big part of the discussion we had today with the fire department staff, and that institutional knowledge that they have that we don't include into our data analysis. So it's still a lot of discussion that needs to be had in that regards.
And my last question is, you said medical will rise, and I just don't quite understand how it will rise, because, you know, I see them in District 3, you know, because Charlie done fell out. They know these people by name because it happens so much. They're not going to go get any medical insurance, those same people. So how do you say that?
In our experience, as population increases, so does medical service demand. As populations age, the service demand also increases. 65 and older is a higher target hazard than those under 65. So if you have an aging group in a particular area of the city, chances are that that service demand will be higher in that area than an area that has families, younger families. So again, it's a projection. We expected service demand in medical instance to go down because of the Affordable Care Act. We've seen the opposite of that. And this is based on the existing service delivery model. If we get into the community paramedicine and the other aspects of providing those services prior to an incident occurring, there is a chance that you can see those decline as you take care of some of those frequent callers that are utilizing services regularly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman DeLisa.
Thank you, Mayor Wolgast. I would like to start by replying to a comment that my fellow council member made. Topeka is a fabulous city. Whoever's not living in Topeka is missing out. And
For the record, I said more fabulous.
Anybody considering a wonderful place to come live and play, Topeka is it. Now, that being said, I significantly appreciate this report. And the reason that I appreciate this report is because we are in a process in which, as we're looking at this organization, which we are, in a long-term, in a holistic fashion, the number one thing that I have in the back of my mind is we have a budget that we're really uncertain about because we don't know what the state is going to do. Number two, we have 2 fire stations, 13 in Mr. Harmon's district and 14 in my district that we are considering building. And that is an investment of several millions of dollars.
We don't have them. They're not there.
They're not, but we're considering the construction of them, which is going to be a significant investment of millions of dollars. In addition to that, we're trying to define as a city with what Mr. Feyender had reported to us a while back, the land growth and use management. I think that's what it is. Pardon me if I got it wrong. With regards to how far are we using our resources? How much are we going to annex? You know, where are we going to try to grab all of the resources that the city is utilizing? Because what we're not realizing is that if we're not looking at all these things, we're spending more money, and that is a burden to our taxpayers. So for me, these reports are extremely important. And I know that they're uncomfortable to have, and they may bring smiles to people's faces when we're having these discussions because they're uncomfortable. But it's something that I think that as a body, we should take a really good look at, because it's not just about the fire stations. It's about the resources that we have in our city and how we're making better use of the resources that our taxpayers are paying for. Yes, we're doing an amazing job, and I have nothing but respect for our firefighters. I have many friends who are firefighters in this community, and I know that the sacrifice that they do in our police individuals is just something that is nothing less than admirable. But we also have to be good stewards to them. So as we are trying to determine how we're going to invest our assets, I think it is crucial for us to have a really good, long, hard look at how these decisions affect every single aspect of the operation of our community. So I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to hearing how the discussion goes with the Met Services. because that's a discussion that we've been having round and round, even before I got elected. And it's not the place, and I know that, but it's just exciting that we're finally having these really deep conversations and that they're extremely data-driven. And much more importantly, that we have, at this point in time, our firefighters back there that have been involved in the process from what I'm hearing, and that will continue to be involved in this process as we move forward. So it's a big discussion, but I want for all of us to keep in mind that this is not just about firefighting. This is about how we run a good city and how we make the best use of our resources for our taxpayers.
Deputy Mayor Hiller.
Just have one technical question. I wanted to tie back into Councilman Harmon's question earlier. That was on the population projections. I got a chance, shortly after I was elected, to see and be walked through the 2006 study, but I don't have a copy of it. And what was the difference between the population projections then? I mean, when I've thought back and I've looked at the recommendations from that study, even in the early 2000s, I think there were still expectations of growth and annexation and higher population growth. I have assumed that, but I wasn't sure. So I wondered how those assumptions about growth, what they were in 2006 and what changes you made.
If you can look at page 22, maybe.
Okay.
That is the population history and growth rate. The red line is the growth rate. If we look at between 2000 and 2006, that trend was upward. So it used that historical growth rate trend to project the information that was provided in the 2006 study. However, for us, we looked at 2000 to 2014, which if you'll look between 2009 and 2014, the trend was the opposite. So that impacted the population projection on this new study.
That's what I was expecting. If some of us wanted to look at exactly what you used in 2006 and what you used this time, would that be available?
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, the 2006 study is online. We can send you a link to it.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Very good. Other questions? Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
And I think you've done a superb job of responding to the questions and leading us along. And very important study, just very significant. Look forward to working on it and taking all the next steps.
Thank you. And again, we always like to come back and do additional work for previous clients. So we appreciate the trust that you've put in ESCI to complete this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
City Manager.
Pro bono?
Negative.
Pro bono. 10 years. Just an update.
Thank you.
Any other comment, Mr. City Manager, you want to make?
No, I
We'll be going
appreciate the
forward.
opportunity to initiate this discussion, and it's a highly complex issue that goes way beyond deployment, gets into the issues with the medical coverage and community medicine, but we look forward to continue to work on it.
Okay, good. Okay, that completes the discussion items. We proceed to announcements. There is not a council meeting next week. We have had 4 in a row. We take a week off, then we'll start again. So we'll go to the announcements. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of very brief announcements. There's a project meeting for Phase 2 of the 37th Street. I think the portion that was finished between Burlingame and the bridge was very well received, and I think this next project is going to be equally good, but significantly more complex because of the number of people who access it. So we're hoping to have a lot of people participate in the meeting. It's Thursday, the 18th, from 4:30 to 6 at Topeka Baptist Church, and we're going to really get out there and get people to participate in that. Secondly, there's a project meeting for Phase 2 of the Stewart Avenue project on Monday, the 22nd, and that's from 4:30 to 6 at Sacred Heart Church. And then the last thing is this Thursday, I'm sorry, is it this Thursday or next Thursday? Next Thursday at Westar, the groundbreaking? Next Thursday, sorry. A week from Thursday. Westar's having the groundbreaking on their Pocket Park, and if you've had an opportunity to walk down Kansas Avenue. There's a lot of activity. The landscaping is really starting to go in. Nothing pretty yet. I mean, it's the popping flowers and stuff aren't yet, but I just repeated that because Brent Bowles said that last night. I wish I wouldn't have at this particular moment, but it's really looking good, and we're continuing to look, and while it's all the good news of it getting finished, there's also Doug and his team are working very diligently with the contractor to make sure that we address all the punch list items and make sure that when the project is ultimately signed off on, it's right and ready to go. Thank you, Mr.
Deputy Mayor.
I don't have any particular things. I just know that if any of us that follow the City of Topeka emails, we get them back and forth as council, and we get out and about in our committees and in meetings. I just want to do a shout out to the staff. People are working their tails off. We have a lot of both new but many long-time agendas that are beginning to unfold and beginning to get traction and move forward. And I just wanted to shout out to appreciate everybody from the city manager on down. It's busy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Clare.
Just a reminder that the Operation Soup Line for Doorstep will be on February 23rd from 11 to 7. I'll be serving, I think, at 6. Come by, be fun. Thank you.
There'll be many of us there. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Manager, about a month ago, I asked you about all the lights that are out, the Westar lights. Have you made contact with anybody? I don't know about the rest of you guys. Whenever I drive down, I don't care whose district, there's 3 and 4 and 5 lights out. That is too many lights. We need to get them reported. I've reported my light 3 times and it's still not fixed. Do we have a contact over there that we can get these lights fixed?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Ortiz, we immediately following that conversation, we met with the gentleman who oversees the, not that specific program, but all of those programs, and we do need to have a follow-up conversation because they wanted to take a new look at the whole streetlight program, so I will get you a better answer.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start turning in all these lights. I mean, I've probably got a list of 25, and we can't afford this. Not in different areas. When it's dark out there, you know. But we pay a good price for those lights to be on.
Yeah, and Mayor and Ms. Ortiz, if I could just jump in very quickly, I strongly encourage all of you to do that. Send them to me or to Doug, and we will continue to work on that punch list. I will say the gentleman's name was Russ Cobb. I think many of you know him, and he really has been desirous of helping us on that program. Not only that, but even the new programs as we talked about.
I truly appreciate that. And last but not least, the gentleman that was killed in the train accident kind of hits close to home. So we just need to really watch, you know, our train activities. I know I see it all the time. I've done it myself, you know, gone across those tracks. I see it all the time on 10th Street, on 4th Street, but it just really hits close to home. And my condolences to the Taylor family. And I will be talking to Amtrak to see. I don't know if I want to go out there after the Mars visit tomorrow to see if we have the proper lighting and the proper stuff out there, because I too worry about all of our in-town stops. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Shem.
Thank you very much. I've had the privilege of hearing from a lot of constituents in District 4 with regards to concerns they've had about public safety, and I wanted to take a moment to thank Sergeant Simmons, Officer Long, Officer Connell, and Chief Brown by extension for the quick responses and the feedback I've gotten from my constituents on the courtesy of our police officers in responding, their thoroughness. Just our community policing goes out of their way to respond to citizen complaints and concerns, and that's always appreciated, and we don't say it enough. So just to be clear, on the one hand, I appreciate the citizens that are willing to speak up with their concerns, and second, it's such a huge blessing to have officers respond to those concerns in the appropriate manner, and that just encourages betterment for the whole community. I appreciate both sides.
Thank you. Councilwoman Delisla.
Thank you, Mayor Wolgast. I wanted to take some time just to extend my appreciation to our counterparts across the street, the County Commission. There's been so much conversation with regards to the half-cent sales tax and the interlocal agreement and all these things. And to me, it's kind of disheartening when I hear all the negativity being publicized in the media, because I think that it significantly dissipates from all the work that is being done by both of these bodies. And I do not appreciate when there is a hyper focus on what can be going or what could be sensationalized versus what we are actually doing to work together to move this community forward. So we just had a fabulous JADO meeting in which we had great decorum, great conversations, set up a plan to move this city forward. We have great new things happening in our community. If you have not had the opportunity to meet with Matt Pavarnik, I tell you what, I thought I was the Energizer Bunny. That dude has energy, and he's got his work cut out for him. But I think that as we all continue to focus on what we're working together for, which is the betterment of our city, we're going to accomplish a lot more things. So just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that and just celebrate the fact that we are moving Topeka forward together.
Thank you, Councilman Jensen.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to send a quick shout out to the team that's working on the Dillon's project. The store is now officially closed. That team is kicking into higher gear. So it's really exciting to see them actually start the process of implementing some of the things we've talked about over the past few weeks. It's just really, really great to see those folks get together. And a lot of them are just average Joes that have stepped up to take on this challenge. And it's really great to get to work with them. Hope everyone had a wonderful Valentine's Day. You know, things are going to start heating up as we get into spring and summer. And it's just like Mr. Colson was commenting on the pocket parks that are coming in downtown. It's going to be a fantastic year, and I can't wait to see more of it. Have a great week, everybody.
Councilwoman Schwartz.
Thank you, Your Honor. Great things are happening in our community. I was at the garden show this weekend. The parking lot was packed and full, and I worked a booth and I asked people where they were from, and they came from New Strawn, from Wamego, from Holton. So I think what our events that we have in Topeka draws a lot of people from out of town, but it's going to take us coming to those events to keep them going. So anytime we can support TPAC, the Expo Center, all of those, I would recommend that we do that. My gem this week is the Kansas Historical Society and the Shawnee County Historical Society. My brother was in this last weekend from San Antonio with his son-in-law, who is a history major. I suggested they go to the History Museum. He came back and said that San Antonio doesn't have anything like what we have here. So I really felt like we do have a lot of things. And you can join the Shawnee County Historical Society for $35. Just go to ShawneeCountyHistory.org in the About Us, and you can join them. And then a reminder that this next week is Chief Justice Kay McFarland's sale, and we'll get out some more information on that. So we don't have a council meeting next week, so I can't tell you about it next week. But I do encourage you to go to the zoo and go to the shelter house, and that's where the sale is going to be next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thanks.
Councilman Cohen, Councilman Harmon. That completes our announcements. We have no public comment. Deputy Mayor Hiller, do you want to set the parameters for our executive session?
Request an executive session for 5 minutes with the elected officials and Jackie Russell from HR.
All right. That is a motion by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councilwoman Claire. Discussion, all those in favor vote yes, opposed vote no. I vote yes. Thank you. Especially,
We have 10 yes.
10 having voted yes, we'll start as soon as the room is clear.
Okay.
Something about that.
If you want to go back in, Jackie can answer some questions about that.
The executive session has ended with no action taken. Is there a desire to return to another executive session? If you wish to move that.
I would move we return to executive session for 10 minutes with the same parameters as the previous one.
Second.
It's been moved with the same people in attendance. It's been moved and seconded that we have another executive session for 10 minutes. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Okay, we'll soon be in executive session. The executive session has been completed with no action taken. There being no further business before the body, we are adjourned.
I'm still into you. I should be